Hi everybody, and thank you for joining me for our How to Appeal an Admission Decision workshop presented by the Harvard College Transfer Center. My name is Ms. Para and I'm a counselor at the Transfer Center, and I'm here to go over all the steps on appealing an admission decision from a university for students. Now, this is probably the hardest part of transfer counseling for our students is when they receive a letter or email sharing that they didn't get the news that they wanted to hear about admission. And it can be a challenging time for students and very emotional. So we are here to support you with any questions that you have. If you have any concerns or confusion or distress, please let us know. We're glad to support you, and we want to support you and make sure that we get all the answers that we need to for you and help you with the appeal process if you choose to do so. So today what we're going to go over is what is an admission appeal, common reasons for appealing, things to be mindful of, additional options, committing to a different campus, the appeal process, and then a Q&A for our live guests that are joining us here at the Virtual Transfer Center on Zoom. So to get started, what is an admission appeal? An admission appeal is a request for a university to give your application reconsideration for admission. So what it means is you're not necessarily telling them, please give us a different decision, and they're going to automatically change the decision from a no to a yes for students who are denied admission. But what you're asking is if they could look at your application one more time in case they do change their mind and want to make a new decision for you on admission. So common reasons students have for appealing. The appeal campus was the first choice that the student had, and the student wants to exhaust all measures to be admitted. Sometimes the student will add extra classes to reach the minimum 60 units. So in the case that a student was not going to finish 60 units by the end of the semester, 60 transferable units, then they decide that they're going to add extra classes and they get the denial letter. Then they want to do an appeal and say, look, I'm taking extra classes, please reconsider me. I'm doing everything that I need to. Sometimes a student will repeat a course in the final semester that was needed for transfer. So let's say a student had on their application to Long Beach that they were going to do business calculus in fall and then take 15 more units in spring, right? But in fall, the student ended up not being able to complete business calculus. Long Beach might send them a denial letter, but if the student was able to re-enroll in business calculus and they're doing well in the class, then that's a good time to also consider doing an appeal, because you're able to repeat that class and you're completing the courses that they asked for transfer admission. You also might want to consider if you added additional recommended courses for the major in the last semester. So for students who, business is a really easy one. Let's say a student didn't want to do business calculus at all, and they realized after they got a denial letter from Long Beach that Long Beach really did want them to take business calculus. So they ended up enrolling in a late start class, and now they want to do an admission appeal saying, hi, thank you so much for reviewing my application. I'm in business calculus now. May I please have one more review to see if I'm eligible to enroll or be admitted? That's another example of when it would be a good idea. Sometimes students make errors on the application. Unfortunately, sometimes our students are not, they are not able to get any help with their application, which we want you to come to the Transfer Center very early and get application help from us. And we want to watch you hit that submit button and feel happy and excited. But in the event that a student wasn't able to get help and they made errors on their application, that's when we want to make sure that we do an admission appeal for the student too. Sometimes they forget or they don't realize that they should not be including untransferable classes in the transfer GPA and things like that. Sometimes students decided later on that they wanted to do an ADT when at first they didn't want to, and they got denied. Then that's a good time to say, look, please look at my application one more time. I'm getting the ADT now, and I'm almost done with it. I'll be done with it by the end of the spring. That's a good time to turn one in. Sometimes students, their GPA will increase because of academic renewal or course repetition. That's a common one. So sometimes my students, depending on your academic renewal case, some students are not eligible to apply for academic renewal until the end of, let's say, winter session. But by that time, your January update has already passed because winter session ends in February. Your January update's due January 31st. maybe you didn't get your grade yet for your winter class. So in that case, sometimes if your academic renewal doesn't come through until March or late February, then the universities don't know that your GPA is much higher now. And so that's when it's also a good time to do an appeal for admission because your GPA went up significantly from academic renewal. Sometimes our students have medical or financial reasons beyond the student's control, extenuating circumstances that for one reason or another they weren't able to complete something, and that is why they need to appeal. So maybe they had some kind of health problem and they couldn't turn in their application on time. Maybe financially speaking, there was a loss of Wi-Fi or something that prevented them from turning in the application or turning in the January deadline. Things do happen, so that's when we want to make sure that we advocate for the student or that you advocate for yourself and say, please give me another chance. I'm a hardworking student. I know that I would be a wonderful student at such and such campus. So students always have many different reasons, and we want to make sure that no matter the reason that you're doing a very careful and thorough job advocating for yourself in the appeal process. So some things to be mindful of for our students, because yes, we do want to encourage our students, if you believe that you deserve a second chance to be reviewed and have the application looked at, absolutely we support that. But we also don't want to make it seem like the university accepts every single appeal that they receive, because there are a lot of things that go into consideration. So one of them being that the university has already admitted the maximum number of students to meet their enrollment targets. So let's say a campus can only bring in 600 students in the new year, right? So let's say they normally do their statistics and account for, if they give 900 acceptance letters, they know they'll fill about 600 seats, right? Which is perfect. It matches up with how many students they need to fill, right? Because not every student that gets an acceptance letter ends up going to that campus. So when that happens, they don't really have any space saved for students on the wait list, and then they really don't have any space saved for students on the appeal list. They really keep all the seats for the students that they send the first acceptance letter for. Now there's a tiny percentage of admission decisions that are changed through the appeal process, and that's because they say, okay, all of the waitlisted students, we heard back from a lot saying that they don't want, a lot of accepted students saying that they might not want, they're not going to come, so now we have space for you. And then from there, they look through the appeals and okay, space for this student, space for this student. So it's a case-by-case basis. And approval of appeals are often considered only for extraordinary reasons beyond the control of the applicant. So you want to make sure that you submit an appeal so that you know you've tried everything within your power to be admitted. That is what it is at the end of the day. If my student has that gut instinct of, you know what, I'm going to wonder if I didn't do the appeal. And I don't want to be the person that wonders what would have happened if I did or didn't. And of course we support that. So that's important. It's something that you need to be honest with yourself about. If you're going to regret not doing an appeal, then of course we want you to do one. There's also nothing to lose when submitting an appeal except for the time it took to complete the process. And I understand it too, because it's safe to say all of my students, you spent hours and hours and hours on your actual application. It took a very long time to get that done. So when it comes around to receiving bad news, that's really devastating for a student. And so to want to exhaust the option and put in even more time for the appeal, I absolutely understand that. You also want to make sure that you follow the university's instructions for submitting the appeal and meet the appeal deadline. That is so important. Sometimes universities only give as little as 15 days after the initial decision letter is sent to turn in an appeal too. So that's why when a student gets a letter that is a denial, you want to make sure you read it very carefully so you understand how to do an appeal, how much time you have, and try to see a counselor as soon as possible so we can help you make sure that everything's perfect before you turn it in. So additional options while appealing admission. Sometimes my students want the options, sometimes they have their heart set on one university, but I do like to share options for my students. You want to make sure that you submit your intent to register or enroll for a campus that has accepted you, and follow all steps to ensure your admission still stands at that campus. So that's a scenario where I always use myself for example. Let's say I got accepted to Dominguez Hills, but I got denied from Long Beach. I would want to make sure if my number one goal is to transfer in fall, I want to make sure that I'm still transferring in fall, whether Long Beach accepts my appeal or they choose to remain with the same response, no, Natalie. So in that case, I want to make sure that on the other side, I'm still paying for orientation at Dominguez, submitting my intent to enroll for Dominguez, sending my transcripts, right? So technically, you're paying all that money and spending all that time confirming with Dominguez that yes, you're going to go. And then at the same time, you're also working behind the scenes with Long Beach of, okay, here's my appeal. I can send my transcripts if you want me to resend those. This is documentation I have for these reasons, right? So you're kind of trying to do two things at the same time: maintain admission to Dominguez, submit your appeal, and hope everything goes through at Long Beach. And sometimes it is at the student's expense, because if Long Beach tells me at the end of summer, hey, Natalie, congrats, you can come join us at Long Beach. I just lost all my money at Dominguez. I probably already spent hours in orientation, already paid the fees, already signed up for classes maybe, and then I have to turn around, drop all those classes, lose that money, and then end up sending a final transcript to Long Beach, paying for orientation there, all the different extra things that come along with that, right? So that's why it's really risky for students. We don't want to make it seem like this is a very relaxed choice. It's not. It's actually very nerve-wracking for a lot of students. So that's why you want to make sure you stay in touch with us so we can support you through that, because it is really concerning for the student. And we want to make sure that we're helping with, if you read a letter and it doesn't make sense, we can help you read that letter and understand what they're asking for, help you with, different deadlines and things like that. Now, if you really want to go to the campus you're appealing, you could also apply for a future semester, but be careful that you do not exceed the maximum units that campus will allow for transfer. And I'll give you an example. So if at a campus, let's say Long Beach, they have spring admit. So August 1st to 30th, you can reapply for admission to start in spring if you got a denial letter for fall and you're in the same time doing the appeal. So you could do that, but if you're going to start taking extra classes, it could affect your financial aid in the future. It could affect how many units will transfer over, because they'll still give you area credit, but some of those units won't count at the university, and it'll have affected your financial aid too. So that's when we don't want to overstuff the units either into your schedule just for the purpose of taking classes, right? So we want to be very strategizing with what we're doing with our time while we're waiting to hear back from the university. Now, a lot of my students ask, should I commit to a different campus? Should you commit to a different campus? The answer could be yes. If you've been admitted to the university you really would like to attend, you've been admitted to your major, and your priority is being at a four-year university as quickly as possible, and you don't mind losing your deposit money if your appeal is approved. You'll end up paying for two deposits to two campuses, right? The answer could be no if you have no interest in attending any of the universities you've been admitted to, you have not been admitted to your major at the university that did admit you, and transferring as quickly as possible is not a priority for you. And that is because every single student has their own journey, they have their own perspective, and they have their own reasons for making the choices that they do. So as long as you make the best choice for yourself and you're honest with yourself, you will always make a good decision for yourself. But just want to make sure that you're mindful of what is more important to you. For some students, it's going to a specific campus. For other students, it's I want to graduate from the university. In 2 years from now, I want my bachelor's degree. So I don't have time to wait for such and such campus to finally say yes to me. I'm just ready to move on with my education. So it just depends on the student. Now the appeal process varies by campus. At Cal State Long Beach, it's within 15 days of the original admission decision. It requires form and documentation. There's a link here. At Dominguez Hills, it's within 15 days of the original admission decision as well. It requires a cover sheet and documentation. This is the form here. At Cal State Fullerton, it must be received by Fullerton within 1 month of the date that you received the negative letter. It requires a cover sheet and documentation. And at Cal State LA, it's within 15 days of notification. Requires cover sheet and documentation. These four are some of our more popular campuses that our students apply to, so that's why I just chose these campuses. They're also very local. So these are just some examples to give you. And how to complete an appeal. Sorry, let me go backwards. So you want to make sure that you follow all the instructions that are asked of you. It varies by campus, and a transfer counselor can review your appeal packet before you turn it in. Do not miss the deadline or your appeal will not be considered at all. You want to also make sure that you're providing a strong documentation, so transcript with current schedule, official records, maybe doctor's note, medical records, so on. You want to make sure you write a compelling letter. Do not be short because you are asking for the university to reconsider you. So if you're just short, grammatically incorrect, looks like you just typed it out really quick in a rush and hit send, that doesn't always look very convincing. So I'm going to give you an example of a rough draft letter a student had sent before they met with me. And everything is, it's completely, as you can see, no name, no information. For transparency, this is just educational purposes. So this is the rough draft, draft one. So the student, as you can see, there's a little bit of grammatical errors. I recently got an email saying my offer of admission was withdrawn. With further research, I found out the reason was due to me not having 60 transferable units. I feel like this is a mistake because after confirming with my counselor at Los Angeles Harbor College, she found I have completed 62 transferable units. I know there are many students who have applied, but I have attached my unofficial transcripts, and I would greatly appreciate it if blank, because I don't want to say the university either, could please reevaluate the number of transferable units so I could attend my dream school. Thank you for your consideration. So the student did a great job for the rough draft. It was a little bit of grammatical errors, was a little wordy at times, and it was a little short. So we want to make sure that we expand that, make sure it's very well written because they're also evaluating the student's writing skills when they look at these, and of course make sure that the student appears very thankful that they have the opportunity to do an appeal. So this is our second draft. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to request a second review of my application for admission. The initial review of my application calculated my transferable units to be less than 60 by the end of the semester. After confirming with my counselor at Los Angeles Harbor College, she found I have completed 62 transferable units. I know there are many students who have applied, and I appreciate the reconsideration of my application. I've included my unofficial transcripts, and I would greatly appreciate it if blank could please reevaluate the number of transferable units I have earned. Blank is my dream school, and I know if given the opportunity, I will flourish with the excellent education available to blank students. Okay, so a little bit longer, cleaned up very nicely. In this case, I hate to say it, but it was the university's fault because they counted the students' units wrong. That's why I didn't include their name in this example. But they counted the students' units wrong, so that's why we kind of kept it more along the lines of thank you so much. We don't want to make it seem like, oh, you guys made a mistake, I'm blaming you, give me a spot now. We don't want to go with that approach because then it can come off as insulting to that campus, and they're human just like everyone else, and sometimes people make mistakes. So just want to make sure that the student stands up for themselves, but also in a respectful way to the university because they really do want to go there. And in this student's case, they were admitted. So that's just an example of a student whose appeal was accepted. The student did not find out until a couple of days before the first day of school at that campus. So that's why it takes a long time for it to go through, and that was when the university made a mistake. So I know you can imagine, like, it's really hard to get a yes from an appeal. It does happen though, and we are here to help you with that. So thank you so much for joining us for this workshop. We appreciate all of you, whether you watched in person with our Transfer Center, on YouTube, IGTV, and you're always welcome to reach out. We are glad to answer any of your questions.